Sometimes content finds us precisely when we're ready to receive it. If you're watching this during a difficult period, feeling lost or confused, there might be more at work than simple chance. Carl Jung described meaningful coincidences as synchronicity, moments when external events align with our internal psychological needs. This isn't about algorithms or luck, it's about psychological readiness. If you're feeling a persistent discomfort, an emptiness that won't fade, or anxiety without obvious cause, your psyche might be signaling that something fundamental needs to change. This discomfort isn't weakness or failure. It's your inner self pushing toward necessary growth. The roles you've been playing may no longer fit who you're becoming. The identity you've constructed might feel increasingly like a cage. No amount of rationalization or distraction can silence this internal pressure. Jung called these moments invitations to individuation, calls to live more authentically. Most people resist initially. They cling to familiar patterns, even when those patterns cause suffering. But maintaining what should naturally end only intensifies the pain. When we refuse necessary evolution, that resistance manifests as depression, self-sabotage, or physical illness. Growth rarely happens comfortably. Just as a butterfly must struggle from its cocoon, your emerging identity is forming through this current confusion and fear. This video appearing now might be one signal that your transformation has already begun. You don't need complete understanding yet. What matters is recognizing you cannot continue unchanged. That recognition is your starting point. Consider this question. Are you prepared to release the version of yourself you've been performing? Jung identified synchronicity as a bridge between consciousness and the unconscious mind. When you reach psychological saturation, unable to continue with your current character, your unconscious begins orchestrating meaningful encounters and signs. Logical advice no longer penetrates. Reality itself seems to bend, delivering messages your conscious mind keeps avoiding. You might notice recurring themes in books, films, and conversations. Different people express strikingly similar ideas. Dreams become vivid and strange. You feel sudden urges to make major changes without logical justification. Something larger appears to be pulling you from stagnation. Synchronicity intensifies when unconscious material struggles to emerge. Your old narrative has expired, and the unconscious moves autonomously toward new possibilities. This path offers no map or guarantees, which is why rational thinking dismisses these signs as coincidence or imagination. But patterns exist. Life is attempting to reposition you. When you ignore these signals, they escalate from whispers to shouts. Anxiety increases, physical symptoms appear, dreams turn dark, suppressed emotions erupt, everything trapped inside forces its way out. Resistance makes the transition more painful. Recognizing signs isn't enough. You need courage to follow them, trusting that if life presents this message now, you're being called to cross a threshold. Jung described enantiodromia as the psychic movement where everything shifts into its opposite. When you suppress your authentic self too long, what's been repressed returns forcefully. That's when everything transforms. External life might appear unchanged while something internal begins fracturing. You fulfill obligations and maintain appearances, but your soul no longer cooperates. Places that once comforted you now feel empty. Conversations seem hollow. Others still see your familiar persona, but you know you've already changed. Worse yet, you don't know who you're becoming. This marks the transformation's beginning. It starts quietly, not with dramatic events, but with persistent doubt that won't disappear. Chronic dissatisfaction without apparent cause. You convince yourself everything is fine because nothing terrible has happened. But internally, you sense something has ended without announcement. Jung described this as the initial transformation stage, when the ego realizes it cannot sustain the old narrative. The psychic energy supporting your roles and patterns drains away. You've reached saturation, the limit of your current character. Attempting to maintain the old functioning only exhausts you further because what you're trying to revive is already dead. This phase brings contradictions. Fatigue without exertion, sadness without reason, confusion without clear questions. Nothing satisfies. Rest brings no peace. Your mind circles endlessly, while your body carries what your soul cannot bear. Externally, you may still function, but internally, the implosion has begun. You're no longer living, just sustaining an illusion through inertia. Most people seek distraction at this point, anything to numb what's emerging. But nothing works long because the turning point demands presence. Discomfort is announcing that the old is crumbling. The crumbling is necessary because reconstruction begins with ruin. The psyche has survival mechanisms, and enantiodromia is one. This Greek term meaning running to the opposite represents a psychological law of inevitable balance. When you maintain a rigid way of being too long, the psyche silently prepares the emergence of its opposite. This opposite doesn't emerge gently. It erupts, destroying whatever is necessary to restore balance. If you've spent your life pleasing others at your own expense, eventually you cannot bear saying yes when you want to scream no. If you've lived purely rationally while ignoring feelings, repressed emotion will eventually overwhelm you. If your identity centers on success, perfection, and control, the psyche will lead you through vulnerability, failure, or loss if necessary, not as punishment, but as correction. This doesn't depend on conscious will. When saturation is reached, reversal begins regardless. You find yourself overtaken by unexpected impulses, thoughts that contradict your previous identity, emotions that defy your logic. Another version of you is emerging from the depths. This opposite version isn't your enemy, it's your forgotten half. Everything rejected, silenced, and repressed. The shadow. The intuition traded for reason. The individuality sacrificed for conformity. Now all of this returns, demanding integration. Jung saw this as essential to individuation, the birth of a more whole, authentic, less divided human being. But it requires going through collapse. You must allow the old you to die. Many fiercely resist enantiodromia, trying to maintain the old direction through greater effort and control. This only prolongs suffering because the psychic movement has already begun. The more you cling to the old, the more violent the force of the new becomes. The question isn't whether reversal will happen, it's how you'll respond. With rigidity or surrender, resistance or listening. When the psyche decides change is necessary, it doesn't ask permission or wait for convenience. It acts with symbolic intelligence that, for those who listen, becomes impossible to ignore. Jung identified 4 unmistakable manifestation types that appear during true turning points. First are dreams with death and rebirth symbols. You might dream of being naked publicly, losing teeth, collapsing houses, or dying. For the unconscious, these aren't destructive, but transitional. The collapsing house represents your old identity crumbling. Nakedness reveals your true self exposed after masks fall. Death in dreams calls for rebirth. The life you were living no longer serves you. Second are increasingly frequent synchronicities. People appear unexpectedly with perfectly timed messages. A book finds you. A video appears at the exact moment. Casual conversations provide answers you didn't know you needed. When synchronicities intensify, the unconscious is guiding your crossing. Third is losing identification with old roles. Your work, relationships, and routine feel like playing a character who no longer believes their own lines. What once gave belonging now oppresses. Social functions sound false and limiting. You try maintaining the performance, but your body doesn't cooperate. The role has become a prison. The soul wants freedom. Fourth is deep dissatisfaction with no clear external cause. Everything may seem right outwardly, but internally the void grows. Nothing fills it. No achievement brings peace. This isn't clinical depression, but the existential void preceding the new self's birth. It's the fertile ground of transformation. These signs aren't meant to be resolved, but heard. They don't want quick responses, but surrender. If you recognize them, the psyche has already decided. The old self is dying. The new hasn't been born. You're on the threshold. When the turning point fully sets in, your life enters suspension. The old no longer works. The new hasn't arrived. All that remains is a psychic landscape in ruins. Many despair here, trying to rebuild what cannot be sustained, seeking quick solutions and distractions. But the truth is brutal. This moment demands symbolic death. The version of you that sustained your identity must be undone so a new one can be born. Jung insisted no deep transformation is possible without ego collapse first. It's not about destroying who you are, but releasing structures you confused with your essence. Titles, narratives, masks, everything built to please, protect, and fit in needs releasing. That hurts because even what suffocates us offers security. Letting go is like releasing a buoy in the dark ocean, not knowing if solid ground lies ahead. The first step is honoring the psychological death. Don't try fixing anything now. Don't force functionality, productivity, or optimism. You're in mourning for who you were, who you pretended to be, who can no longer exist. Acknowledge how much your old roles served you. Thank them, then release them. This farewell allows the unconscious to know you're willing to move forward. The second step is creating space for the unknown. The conditioned mind seeks immediate fulfillment, more content, more people, more answers. But transformation requires accepting uncertainty. That means enduring the void, staying silent, sitting with restlessness without trying to resolve it, just listening. In silent space, the new begins emerging, but only if you silence the noise, including your own hurry. The third step is paying attention to subtle signs. Synchronicities, dreams, and sensations will intensify. Keep a journal. Note patterns. Listen to dreams. Ask them what is dying in you and what is trying to be born. When the unconscious realizes you're willing to listen, it speaks louder and shows the way. Finally, act even without total clarity. The psyche in transformation needs gesture, body, movement. Don't wait for all answers before beginning. Take symbolic steps, have postponed conversations, make avoided closures, say yes or no that represents your emerging truth. Small acts create powerful openings. They tell the unconscious you're moving forward, even with fear, even without a map. Eventually there's nowhere left to run, no more excuses or effective distractions. When the turning point truly arrives, everything within you begins crumbling. What made sense doesn't anymore. What moved you no longer inspires. Even your self-image collapses under the weight of denial. But this, however devastating, isn't the end. It's the clearest sign you're about to be reborn. Jung said we don't choose our turning points. They emerge from the psyche's depths when we've completely exhausted growth possibilities within our current life configuration. You don't decide the moment, but you decide what you'll do with it. Will you resist? Will you try keeping the old alive even though it's already dead? Will you cling to the known even if it means sinking? Or will you have courage to walk through the door your soul has opened? This door doesn't lead to easy answers or quick solutions. It leads down an uncomfortable, demanding path that's profoundly transformative. The turning point begins the individuation process, becoming what you truly are beyond expectations, conditioning, and wounds. But this is only possible when you stop fighting the process and start walking with it. Transformation doesn't happen with clarity. It happens with trust. Trust in something you don't yet understand, but somehow already recognize. If this message spoke directly to you, don't ignore it. This is synchronicity at work. The message you needed has arrived. If it has arrived, you already know on some deep level that you cannot continue as you are. You don't need everything figured out right now. What matters is accepting that the process has begun. Your old self is dying. The new is being gestated. The space between these two is exactly where you are now. Your turning point isn't an end. It's the beginning of something your soul has been longing for. The journey is just beginning.